This is called Gimmicks. He was a regular presence around campus and the makeshift town that surrounded it. Few knew his real name, but I'm sure that was by design. It added to his mystique, the infectious reputation that preceded him. I assumed he was a student, for I'd seen him at the college library and wandering about the quad, but I'd never met anyone who shared a class with him. Money didn't seem to be a problem, as he was always garbed in trendy name brand clothing and taking smooth, calculated drags off expensive imported cigarettes. But it wasn't the snappy dress and the taste of tobacco for which he was known. It was the fact that he never, under any circumstances, wore shoes. Whether it was in the comfort of the climate-controlled interiors or the whim of the unpredictable outdoors, whether in the merciless heat of the Midwest summers or the unrelenting chill that came as the days grew shorter, whether sauntering along plush carpet or the jagged gravel of an unpaved road, completely barefoot he remained. I, like my peers, initially assumed the man's sacrifice had greater meaning. Perhaps he was exposing his feet to the elements to raise awareness for some charitable cause. Maybe the hardship was part of a religious act, a testament to spiritual devotion, or perhaps the gesture communicated something profound, some form of self-expression that words could not adequately convey. He was constantly questioned about the matter, but he always responded with a playful quip. "Shoes slow me down," he'd often reply. "I couldn't find a pair that matched my shirt," he'd jest. And then there was always the crowd pleasing, "I forgot to put on my shoes. I thought my feet felt cold." Of course, this aloofness just fueled everyone's interest and obsession. The combination of the man's bizarre gesture and his unwillingness to explain it made him the center of attention wherever he went. And I was drawn to him like the rest, hoping to ride the wake of his exotic charisma. In a sense, I was the polar opposite of the man with no shoes. Uncomfortable in my own skin, hypersensitive to the opinions of others, ruled by phobias and perceived inadequacies. Yes, I often deposited myself in the same dens of rowdy debauchery that my fellow classmates frequented. It was a small college, and the location of keggers and the routes of the pub crawls were common knowledge. But I was like an extra in a movie, a piece of decoration in the background, who was uninvolved in the adventures of the heroes. It was not an ideal existence, yet it was conducive to one of my favorite pastimes, people watching. And I thought that if I paid enough attention to the breezy masses, I might be able to emulate them and have a small piece of notoriety, or at the very least, a bit of contentment. And who better to stalk than the shoeless wayfarer? He obviously knew how to effortlessly cultivate adulation. While mine was a path of crippling shyness, the man with no shoes had found a way to make all roads lead to him. It was all I ever wanted. So I studied him, became an invisible cipher who was able to get within earshot and unnoticed. Every word was scrutinized, every mannerism dissected. Shoeless, or should I say Tristan, became my informal second major. I learned everything I could about him, and after several months of covert surveillance, an undeniable truth became painstakingly clear. The man with no shoes was completely full of shit. He spouted off bubblegum philosophies and fortune cookie wisdom with the occasional overused movie quote for good measure. And his swarming disciples would eat up every nonsensical word simply because their charlatan sage was without footwear. It also became inescapably apparent what motivated Tristan's meaningless charade. The perks gained from the pointless act far outweighed any momentary discomfort. He had thought up a random act that was sure to be noticed and then fanned the flames of recognition until they erupted into a pyre of unearned popularity. Covered charges were waived, free cocktails were bestowed, and sensual women made their desires evident through gaudy public displays of affection. I couldn't decide whether I hated the shoeless man for tricking his way into paradise or was jealous of him for coming up with the idea first. It was at a house party at the end of finals week that fates converged and intertwined. As usual, my presence was barely acknowledged. Even the host at the door gave me little more than a passing glance as he took my $5 and handed me a red plastic cup filled with whatever cheap swill was passing for beer. The man with no shoes was there as well, sitting on a couch sipping a microbrew he'd been offered from a cooler marked VIP. And a harem of inebriated beauties pressed around him, and a few mindless jocks hovered within earshot. Bursts of giggles and guffaws followed each inane observation or recycled joke. Tristan uttered. My own attempts to engage in conversation had proven fruitless, and my journey around the room had ended in front of a muted television playing a vintage mob movie for ambiance. I was getting ready to make a discreet exit, letting the night's actions take their place on my long list of social failures. But then, out of my peripheral, I caught a glimpse of Shoeless and his entourage, and one of my graduate teaching assistants had joined the bevy, wagering himself next to the hollow prophet. In class, she had a canny wit, a rousing intellect, kind eyes, and an empathetic soul. So it was beyond appalling to watch her fish a tube of lotion out of her purse and anoint Tristan's feet with soothing oil as he cooed in satisfaction. My body began to literally tremble with rage, and I had an intense compulsion to smash my fist through a wall or drive my head into a mirror. Leaving was no longer an option. I had to find a place to calm my nerves before attempting to operate a vehicle, lest I accidentally or intentionally wrap it around a tree. Cutting a path through the mess of sweaty, wobbly intoxicants, I made my way to the bathroom. One had a sizable line formed in front of it. The other had a handmade out-of-order sign taped to the door. I chose the latter of the two, not needing functional plumbing and working fixtures to cry and scream or cause bodily harm to myself. I expediently entered the broken lavatory and locked the door behind me. The toilet had been removed and floor tiles were in the process of being uprooted. A variety of tools lay strewn about inside of a sediment-ridden bathtub. That's when I spotted it, a hefty mallet in the center of the idle basin. I snatched it up, feeling the weight and the density in my hand, and in that moment, my anguish dissipated, replaced by a clarity of purpose. In one fluid motion, I maneuvered out of the lavatory and charged toward the man with no shoes. Standing before him with a heaving chest and hammer clutched, Tristan truly noticed me for the first time. He looked upon me with a drug-addled smirk, and opened his mouth to no doubt offer some inane musing, but before he could utter a single word, I brought my weapon down on his exposed left foot with a lifetime's worth of power and fury. A horrendous crack was muffled by the screams from both the shoeless sage and his many acolytes. Women fled the couch in droves, and men backed away as I swung the bloody hammer about, splattering my crazed face with tiny specks of blood. Tristan, in his state of physical and emotional shock, attempted to rise. He was barely out of sitting position when I took out his right foot, smashing the mallet into it with such force that bones shattered and fragments protruded through the skin. I looked down upon him as he wailed and whimpered, content in the knowledge that he'd be far less interesting as a man with two casts. Then I turned to the terrified onlookers, brandishing my hammer like Moses wielding his divine staff. I parted the sea of drunkards and made my leave. I was halfway home when the police caught up with me. My passive surrender concluded the evening's violence. There was a criminal trial and expulsion proceedings, civil suits and emotional testimony, and when the dust had settled, 6 months incarceration and a lengthy probation was deemed adequate restitution. Too broke to finance a move, and with nowhere else to go, I decided to stay in the little college town despite having no real reason to be there. And one night, a handful of pills the doctor prescribed to me gave me enough courage to venture out to one of my old watering holes. I had no idea what kind of reception I would get, if any at all, it wasn't until I slinked over to the bar to get a pint that I was recognized. Holy shit, it's him! The guy who crushed Tristan's feet! The bartender announced with manic excitement. The evening's crowd stopped their casual bantering and moved in toward me. Quickly surrounded, I prepared myself for a deserved pummeling that was certainly about to commence. But then, something extraordinary happened. Instead of a barrage of fists, I was bombarded with animated questions. and rousing accolades. Man, I wish I could have seen you go all berserk around that douchebag and his idiot posse. Did you really take down 10 guys all by yourself? That's totally savage. You gotta tell us the story. Do you still have the hammer? Can we see it? Your drinks are on me tonight, erupted a sea of voices. And so I told the tale and drank 3 shots of brightly colored liquor and caressed beautiful women and spouted witless anecdotes to thunderous cheers of laughter. And I was invited to parties and others still. Everyone wanted to hear the story, which had become more exaggerated and ridiculous with every telling. I even began wearing a tool belt with a mallet in tow to add some showmanship to my orations, and the lemmings ate it up. Of course, all the perks that came with my local celebrity status were ardently offered up, and I immersed myself in the lechery and the debauchery and the avarice and the excess. It was everything I'd ever wanted, and I felt that I deserved it, earned it even. After all, I was the man who broke the man with no shoes.